Good morning everybody, I'm Steve and this is Greenside Up. Today I want to talk about polytunnels. Now the one we're in at the minute is 28 foot by 18 foot. It's a 5-hoop tunnel and I bought this three and a half years ago now, and it's been up for about the same length of time really. And the tunnel itself just came with the 5 hoops and that was it, and I bought the 5 hoops for £100. Now with all the extra fittings and the polythene and putting it together, it was a couple of weeks work to do, and I did have some help from a plot neighbour, Andy here, who helped me stretch the plastic over it and that sort of thing. And all told, the final cost was around £400, but that's only because I went overboard, as is my way, with buying the fittings to put it together and needing to spend that much really. But at the end of the day now, I've got an incredibly strong tunnel because these hoops are from an old commercial polytunnel, so the hoops are 2 inches thick, and even the wall of the tube is probably 4, maybe 5 millimeters thick, so it's an incredibly robust tunnel. So, you know, for next to nothing, I've got a good undercover space for doing many things in, and I do use it for that. I not only grow crops in it year round, I do projects in here. I mean, at one stage I was making and painting a shed base in here for a 16-foot shed that I've got out the back. Made the whole thing in here, painted it right in the middle of winter when you can't get outside and get on the ground. You can come in here and you can do these sorts of things. You can do projects, provided you haven't fully planted it up, and it wasn't that year. So this is one of the reasons why I love tunnels so much. I have got another one, it's a much smaller one, and that one is 10 foot by 20 foot, and it's one of these cheap ones that they call blowaways. Now when I say cheap, when I bought it, it was £160. That was for everything, the frame, all the fittings and the cover as well. The covers don't generally last very long on them, but that one on there has lasted a good 5 years so far. We'll go and have a look at that one in a minute, but I'll just take you on a little tour of this tunnel now. You know, there can't be a gardener out there who doesn't want an undercover space of some sort, whether it be a small greenhouse or, you know, a large tunnel like this. But I do urge you, if you've got the opportunity and if you've got the space, then do consider one or the other. It will bring your garden on in leaps and bounds. To my mind, you've got to have one really, you really got to. And hopefully this video will help to convince you to do that and take your gardening and another step forward. And if that happens, then I am all the happier for it, because I am incredibly happy with my tunnels. Down this side of the tunnel, and it's the side furthest from the sun, I did have trestle tables and benches down here with all my plants that were going to go out into the plot. They were all growing on in their modules or little plant pots in trays, and a brilliant storage area. Now I'm using it for other things. I've got some other plants sown in there, more about that in upcoming days. But this is part of the multi-use of it. It's doing one thing in one season and then another the next season. This is the first of 2 main tomato beds, and these tomatoes have been growing in here since early part of the year, and you know they're nearing the end of their life because they are an early fruiting variety. So all the leaves are stripped off, most of the fruit have been stripped off and processed, and we're just ripening the top half of the plants now. But in the meantime, it means at the bottom we can get more plants in. So I've got a load of dwarf French beans in there, and behind them you can just see in between the stems of the tomatoes there's a load of winter brassicas in there. So this is, you know, multi-use at its best, and this is how I like to do things. It keeps things moving, constantly changing, and keep using the ground. And over here in this other bed is the same tomato plants that I've got in the main beds. And apologies to my subscribers, but if you haven't seen these are free tomato plants. These were growing on from the side shoot of the main plants. I just simply rocked them off the plants and then put them in the ground, dug them up, planted them on, and I've got another set of plants over here. These are all 4 foot, heading for 5 foot tall now. Got fruit starting, and we'll get a crop off this, and they're all for free. and by the time they're ready to come out, I'll have lettuces and things ready to go in, and in fact they will be planted underneath them in the coming weeks. So again, multi-use of the ground. Again, this is another example of multi-using of the bed. So apart from the kale on the right hand side there, all that you see in front of you was planted directly in the ground, or sown directly in the ground, and grow from there. So in the first bed we've got some biennial flowers, so I'm growing them on. They'll be potted up shortly and they'll go out for next year, and we'll get flowers from them. The next bed up is the dwarf French beans. I've got some Oregon sugar snap peas there as well. I'll get a nice late crop from them. And you know, they were just loose soil, bare soil, so I just planted something in and got something going in it. This bed here has propagated brassicas for me right the way since, you know, way back in February. It's continually produced more and more plants. In fact, the kale that you can see in the background there started life in that bed. Now I'm using it for something else. All the brassicas have been cleared out of there, and I've sowed something else in there. More about that in an upcoming video. But again, the space is not wasted. It's grown plants all year and it's still working for me now. And these are the potted up brassicas that came out of this bed, which is now being used for something else, and they will be dotted around the tunnel wherever space becomes available, and the same in my other tunnel. So the idea is that I'm just keeping everything going and all the space is full and being used. And when I run out of bed space in the tunnel for sowing, I'll use this hanging shelf, and that just deters the pests like mice and slugs and snails from getting anywhere near it, and I'll get seeds propagated and going up there. Again, they're just to fill these areas. Anything I've got left over will go outside as a bonus crop, but I want these two tunnels absolutely stuffed to the gunnels all winter this year. And in my opinion, it's absolutely essential to have a water butt inside your polytunnel. If you can find the space for it, it will pay you back in dividends, because what you'll find in winter is the water butts outside and even your taps will be froze, and you may need to water in here. 9 times out of 10 stays not frozen, and if it does freeze, there's only a couple of millimeter ice on it, and that will soon melt within a couple of hours of being in here in the morning, and the sun coming up and heating up in here. So that's the benefit of that. Plus, in the early part of the year, your water is the same temperature as your plants. Now that's important, and rather than putting quite cold water from the tap on your plants and shocking these warm weather loving plants like tomatoes and aubergines and peppers, it's the right temperature for them already, just because you've made the provision of putting a little bit of space to one side for a water butt. So it's something you should consider. Okay, this is the back of my little tunnel. This one is 10 foot wide, but it's actually about 9 foot 6, 9 foot 8 wide and 20 foot long, and it's approaching 6 foot 4, I think, tall. That's only because I've raised it off the ground. We're going to have a look at that right now. Right, this is my third one of this type of tunnel, commonly nicknamed the blowaway, because if you put them up as the instructions say, they will eventually blow away in a winter gale or blow down. I have heard stories here of one guy who lost a tunnel and it went 500 yards that way and over an A road where he found bits of it. But that's a different story. I have seen one on another plot here that moved 2 plots back and 2 plots over, so anchoring it is a good idea. Now I'll just explain about these tunnels first. Is that the very first one I had was a white powder coated frame, and for all intents and purposes it seemed great, and it did last me a good amount of time because I kept repairing it and because I anchored it to the ground. I could see that where I placed it was directly in the prevailing wind of winter, so I anchored it, and that's a different story, but I won't go into that. But it was white powder coated and it rotted from the inside out and eventually failed after about 5 or 6 years. I bought another one and the cover went on it. It's this cheap sort of checkerboard covers that you get with these tunnels, and what tends to happen, or what happened on the last one, is that all the plastic bits actually came out of the cover within about 2 or 3 years. So I ended up with a tea bag tunnel. That moved on. Now the very first tunnel had one ridge pole, the second tunnel had two ridge poles, and this one has the three, as you can see in here. This has been the best iteration of this type of tunnel that I've had up to now. This one is about 5 years old now, and it's rock solid, and that's for a number of reasons. Number one is I've put a central path down and then a raised bed either side, so you can see these scaffold boards here. It's the same on the back, and on the outside of the bed I put a little batten down here at pavement height, just a little tile batten, and the frame rests on that. Rather than resting on the ground, it's a couple of inches off the ground and it's tied to that. So the raised bed itself is holding this tunnel down, and the raised bed is staked all around into the ground. So it's rock solid for that reason. Two raised beds on one on either side, and the frame is anchored to that. Now added to which, I've got a door at either end. The door frame extend 18 inches into the ground, and they have cross brace bars underneath the ground, two of them about a foot apart. So again, and that holds the top of the tunnel up. I'll show you a quick shot of the detail in a minute. Actually molds around the top of the top hoop on either end, and it's tied to that as well. So you've got all this rigidity from all these extra things in here, which makes this tunnel, you know, it'll wobble around but it won't wobble up and down, and when the wind hits it, it gives and then it goes back to where it should be. So very happy with that. So here we have the end detail of where the door frame meets the roof. You can see I've cut out the timber. The frame sits on there, it's under tension from the frame, it's slightly raised, and I've cable tied around it just to hold everything in place. So you can see here in this corner of the tunnel the zip has gone, and that's the zip for the roll up doors, which most of these tunnels have these days, and they've failed literally within the very first 5 or 6 days, very quickly indeed. They're cheap, they are very cheap. That's why I put doors on. So the doors allow me to get in and out easier, allow me to ventilate easier, and they also hold and solidify the structure of the tunnel itself. To the left of the hoop there, you can see the holes in the plastic, the ones I just told you about a few minutes ago. The bits of plastic are starting to fall out of this cover now, and very soon this whole tunnel cover will degrade. I might get another year, maybe 2 out of it. When I do come to replace it, I'll take the old cover off and I'll raise the tunnel to the top of the beds, solidify all that nicely, and then put proper polytunnel plastic on it. There is a tunnel in the plot next to me that we did 5 or 6 years ago the same way, and I helped with that, and I'll go and see if I can get a quick shot of that. I know the guy's not in at the minute, so I can't go in, but I can shoot over the fence. So this is the tunnel in the plot next door, the one I helped recover for the lad in there. That frame is the second iteration of the tunnel that I've had myself, and in fact when I did buy it I bought him one as well, and so we both had one each. He's kept his, and I upgraded mine and got the one with 3 roof bars. That one's only got 2, but that's been covered for 5 or 6 years now with proper polytunnel plastic, no problems, still standing, still doing its job. So I have mostly peppers in here this year, and there's cucumber and a few aubergines and a bit of parsley and some dead hanging baskets that I'm doing that with at the minute. But this ground in here, early part of the season, both beds, both sides were full of wallflowers, and they provided flowers for the vase back in sort of late January through February. Now the pathway in here is 3 foot wide, don't need it to be that wide, but it does allow me to do work in here. I come in here and I can pot things up. For instance, early season I was potting up my potatoes in buckets to go out, and my dahlias when I finally got some that were viable. I also built some frameworks in here which are for plant protection outside, so again it's an undercover space and it's being used for multiple uses. And you know, the heavens could open now and tip down, and whereas people who haven't got a tunnel or undercover space would just go home or get wet or sit in their car, I can go in one of my tunnels and get some jobs done. So I'm never stopped in that respect, and this is the flexibility of an undercover space, and why I would implore you to investigate and see if you can afford one and see if you can fit one in. Right, I haven't done an extra shoot for a while, but this is a good one, so stay tuned. For those people who are interested in a tunnel, there is a very, very good way of getting a lot of tunnel for a little money. You're still going to need to spend a couple of £100, but there's a way of doing it. Now, as the weather turns this year now, I mean, we're in August, so sort of the end of September and going all the way through until things start picking up next spring, tunnels will start to be sold on eBay or other auction websites that are available. I think you have to say that these days, don't you? But anyway, these are ex-commercial tunnels. You don't want to buy one, well, unless you do, from somebody like myself who bought a tunnel a couple of years ago and is giving up and selling it on. You can do that and you can get a good deal that way. But you want to look at the commercial tunnels. Now, there may be something like 200 foot long and 20 foot wide, and you're thinking, whoa Steve, whoa, I don't want one that big. But you don't want all of it. You may only want something that's 40 by 20 foot, which gives you 160 foot by 20 foot spare. So if you're on an allotment site and there's 4 or 5 of you that want a tunnel, go and buy one of these things. Now, you can split those hoops up. You can have 3 or 4 hoops each, build yourself a fantastic tunnel for next to no money. Well, there are a couple of things, you know, it's always buyer beware, so always look at it. I would stay away from the ones that have got gutters attached. These are the double span ones. I would stay away from that because the hoops don't go all the way to the ground, unless you want a double span one, but I personally wouldn't go for it. Also, make sure that it's got all the fittings with it. So they're the fittings where metal reaches and touches metal, or where the bits of the hoop push in. So ensure that it's got all those fittings with it. Don't worry about the plastic and don't worry about the timber. You can get the timber later, and the plastic you want to buy again anyway. You wouldn't want to reuse a bit of plastic that's been over it, because it'll just shred within months. So make sure it's got the fittings with it, and you can really sort of go from there. And then ask the seller, what is the longest piece of metal tubing that is part of the tunnel? He may come back to you and say 6 foot, 8 foot, 12 foot, and then you'll know the size of the vehicle that you'll need to take. Now, most of these commercial tunnels, they say, well, you come and dismantle it and you can have it for this price, and you'll get one of these tunnels for a song. I've seen a tunnel, you know, 200 foot long, 20 foot wide, and I've seen it sell for £200. Now, between 5 people, that's 40 quid each. I mean, that's stupid money for a decent sized tunnel that you can get. Now, you want the vehicle that's big enough to take it, and you need to go gang-handed so that you can take this thing apart. And you go with things like wrenches and spanners and screwdrivers. Go with a proper couple of toolkits, and even a portable hand, you know, grinder if necessary. You may find that you need to grind a bolt off or two. But if you go as a team, you can go and you can achieve this and get yourself a dirt cheap tunnel for next to nothing. So I don't see why you wouldn't do it. Oh, another thing, WD-40, plenty of that. Make sure you got that. Get yourself a tunnel, as long as it's got the fittings with it, because each little fitting that I bought on here were anywhere between £3 and £5 each, and there's 2, 4, 6, 8, 10. There's 10 down this side. There's 5 down the roof and 10 down the other side, so that soon adds up. You know, that's the best part of £100 just for the fittings. So that saves you money. And then you've got yourself a cheap tunnel and an underground, you know, an undercover growing space. So that's my tip for you, is to, from the end of this season, when the weather changes and it's starting to go cold and the daylight's getting shorter, keep your eye open on these internet auction sites and search for second-hand or used commercial polytunnels. You'll see them come up. There's plenty of them every year, and every year I'm tempted, I must admit, to buy another one myself. I've actually got 2 more tunnels to put up here, which I'm going to combine into one, so I've already got that. But every year I'm tempted to buy another, because the undercover growing space is that good, and it's a way for you to get it into this. I mean, you could spend £500 on a little 8x6 greenhouse. Why not go second hand and buy yourself a massive tunnel. Fill off your plot with it as long as your allotment rules allow it. But undercover growing space it's premium real estate. So that's my tip for you in extra shoots this week, is have a look at that, have a think about it, discuss it with your fellow plot holders now, and then in a couple of months time you could be on your way to going and collecting one, or going and looking at one. You know, you could be within the process of it, and next year you could have a growing space like this. So why wouldn't you? Right, so that's it for today. I hope you got something from that. Do have a look into getting yourself an undercover growing space, because you won't look back after that. You know, I call my main tunnel the engine room, and it's for very good reason. It does power this plot on, and quite frankly now I'd be lost without it. So anyway, that's it for today. Just stay safe everyone, and I'll see you on the next one. The next one I think is going to be harvesting, so we'll crack on with that next time in a couple of days. So see you soon, take care, look after yourselves, ta-ra now.